Hello. Uh, we're looking here at a map of Auckland, the city I live in and was born in. Today is actually Auckland Anniversary Day. It's like celebrating the founding of the city. Different areas of New Zealand have anniversary holidays, public holidays just for the city. So this is the last Monday of January is usually the Auckland anniversary, as it is today. And I was actually thinking about doing this last week, not because of today's the holiday, just because I was going to talk about what the kind of I don't know what you call it, the where the shops are, the secondhand shops, and how much I've been looking around this last month. So as I mentioned in another video a few weeks ago, at least in my life was a few weeks ago. Uh, my family are away at the moment. They're visiting overseas, and so I had to stay here because I had to work. Couldn't get time off work, but I've had free time, my days off, and because there's no family here, I've had to kind of find things to do myself. Been playing a lot of guitar, listening to a lot of music, and also going to a lot of secondhand shops, looking at CDs. And uh, it's now, like I said, the 29th of January, so we're almost at the end of the first month of 2024. And the first half of this month, I had some really, really good finds. I had a really good month. The second half, not so much, but I did visit a lot of shops looking for CDs, secondhand shops. So, just to kind of give you an idea, so this is the city I live in. This is a city of 1.5 million people. It's the biggest city in the biggest city in New Zealand, and its geography and placement is kind of unique, as that it is built in between two harbors. So over here you have the Waitemata Harbor, which goes out onto the Pacific Ocean, and down here you have the Manukau Harbor, which goes out onto the Tasman Sea, which is across to Australia. And so it's quite a long, narrow city, kind of hemmed in by two major bodies of water. It's also built on a volcanic field, and so it's quite hilly. Um, and so this is kind of, I guess, what you'd call not Greater Auckland. I guess the Auckland metropolitan area, because if actual Greater Auckland actually goes quite a bit further out into the countryside, but this is kind of what I said, the metropolitan area of Auckland. And I live in this area here, which we call the North Shore, meaning the North Shore of the harbour. And there's quite a few good shops here. So right down here, there's a couple of shops here. I visited them a couple of weeks ago, or it'll be about a week and a half ago now. Up here in this area here, we call Takapuna, there's one shop, which I found a lot of things in there over the years. So I visited there. Up here, there's one place I haven't visited there because it's almost always shit. So almost kind of don't bother going there because I know what it's going to be. Then down towards this area, there's quite a few places. Where am I? Birkenhead. Where is it? Over here. There's about 4 or 5, and that's kind of where I had some of my best finds earlier this year. That if you watch that, the one I did about the Sisters of Mercy, other bits and pieces I can't even remember now what I found, but those shops are kind of like almost my go-tos, because in a close area, kind of like in a 100-meter radius, there's one, two, three or four places, and one place in particular almost always has something. Up here close to where I live, there's a few places. There's one place in particular that's kind of walking distance, which I go at least once a week, usually. I found a few things there, which I'm going to talk about one of those in a minute. And then up towards more this way, there's again about 5 or 6 places in quite a little bit larger area, probably about a 500 meter, 1 kilometer radius. Those places used to be my go-tos, but I find now at the last 6 months, I'm almost never finding anything there. It's kind of weird how it's just kind of turned on its head, that area where it have so many shops. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places in a walkable distance, and almost all of them for the last 6 months have just been absolutely nothing. Then kind of up here on what we call the East Coast beaches, there's especially up here, there's a good place or a couple of good places that I found a few things over there. And I think just before my family left, me and my son were up there. I think I talked about we went to the beach and I popped into some of the shops then and I found two or three things. This area, there's one place which is kind of hit or miss. Actually, further up off this map, there's an area called the Whangaparo Peninsula, which is kind of like used to be like a holiday area, but now it's because the city has grown, has become part of the urban, the contiguous area of populated, land. And I also went out there, I think it was last week, but again, nothing. Kind of, it was almost just, I went up there just to have a drive. Okay, so that's kind of, my neighborhood, the North Shore, those places I talked about. And those are the places I visit, monthly. I'd guess some of those, the place nearest to me, I said weekly, but the other places maybe once a month, once every 2 months, depending on how busy I am. Then we come to cross the harbour. There's a bridge here called the Harbour Bridge, the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and that's the main way to get across the harbour. If that is broken, sometimes, which it is, or if there's very high winds, they have to close it. You have to go right around. It goes off the map. There's kind of like a western ring road that comes right around, connects up to this motorway here. But anyway, usually we take the Harbour Bridge, and that's across to the city where I work. And you have this kind of square here, which is the Auckland Central Business District, I guess downtown. Not so many secondhand shops in that area because obviously that is the main business area and rents are much higher and retail is usually taken up by, what you would expect, brand names, On kind of the city fringe around the kind of the edge of that, you do find a few places, again, not that great, but this is the area where you find the actual secondhand music shops as opposed to secondhand charity shops. So Real Groovy Records, Flying Out Records, Southbound Records, which now, last time I went there, I found that they don't do any CDs. They only do records, vinyl, which is a bummer because for the last 3 or 4 years where I have been visiting places, they always had a small CD section and you could often find some pretty good deals. They'd have like these clearance CDs, but now they have nothing. They've gone fully into records, and that's a bit of a shame. That's one less place to buy CDs. But then we kind of get into this kind of main, I guess this is what we call the main part of Auckland, the isthmus. And, from west to east, north to south, I'm not going to go about every place, but there are, in each, if you see the red writing, like it says there, Morningside, or Sandringham, Balmoral, Epsom. In each of those red name areas, there's usually one or two secondhand shops. Maybe not every single one, but certainly there's one there, there's two there, there's a couple there, there's a couple there, and so on and so forth. I'd say I have visited 70 to 80% of the secondhand shops across the central land area here. Maybe not so much in this kind of southeast area because I actually know Mount Wellington, I have been there. Maybe not so much on this east area, I should say, because East Auckland is kind of like a mystery to me. That's the area where I have been there, of course, but I don't know it very well. It's like another country. And I don't mean that because it's the same makeup as you'd find anywhere else in the city, but it just, because I'm not familiar with it, it always seems a little bit strange there. It actually reminds me a little bit of Los Angeles, of these like flat areas of rows upon rows of houses. Maybe I'm... Anyway, a lot of these shops. And again, hit or miss. I found some okay things over the last month. Some of those things I've shown in previous videos over the last 3 weeks have been from those shops. But a lot of shops, a lot of places, and the majority, I'm going there, stopping, parking the car, going in. Sometimes I'll have like literally a handful of CDs. Other times I'll have boxes and boxes full of them. Doesn't really matter which way, the outcome's usually the same, nothing. Where I did go last week, which I haven't gone for probably a couple of years, because most of these other places I call in maybe twice a year. maybe once every 3 months, once every 6 months. Is kind of this area here, this area down here. Where I did go, which I haven't been for, like I said, 2 or 3 years, was this area here, down towards the Manukau Harbour, Onehunga. And there were 4 secondhand shops there, but almost nothing. Now, there was one place that had some kind of what I'd call borderline things, where I think, well, okay, things that I wasn't as familiar with, but I thought I was willing to give it a try. But then I realized, as I was kind of getting ready to take things up to the counter, I realized that the pricing, and this is something I've noticed this year in my sojourn journeys across all the city and looking at all the different, a lot of these places, these charity stores, op shops, secondhand shops, whatever you want to call them, have put their prices up. Whereas CDs were almost always $1 each. As a general rule, $1 each was the was the case in the majority of stores. Sometimes $2, sometimes 50 cents. But I'd say it would have been 70% of CDs for sale would be $1, 20% to 50 cents, 10% $2. Now what I'm noticing is that a lot of these stores have going up into kind of random pricing of $2, $3, even $4. And this kind of just, maybe it was a decision they made in the new year when they opened after the Christmas holidays. Okay, we're going to kind of reprice, because, everything has increased in price in this country, and I'm sure it's the same in your countries. Obviously, food is the big one, but I can't think of really anything. I guess there are some things, but so many things have put their price up. And obviously, that's often to do with, supply costs. Like it's costs more to ship things, and then the different like manufacturing. You're not just kind of making one thing. You're getting different elements from different things, and so maybe the price of this particular kind of metal has gone up, or that whatever commodity has gone up, and so you can kind of understand it. Other times, it's obviously just price gouging, where a company sees the inflation is generally high across lots of items, and so they just take the chance to put the price of shit up just because they think, well, this is our chance. um, there are things like that. In the case of secondhand items in a charity shop, where you think, well, have their fixed costs really increased? Well, maybe the rent of the shop has increased. Electricity, I'm not sure if electricity costs have actually increased a little bit, but not majorly. I was looking at my electricity bills across the last 2 or 3 years, and I'd say that the average is somewhat similar. Winter pricing has increased, but outside of those really kind of 2 or 3 cold months, the prices really stayed the same. What we call rates, city rates, which I guess in other countries they call city taxes, they've increased some. So I'm sure that affects businesses. So I think some of their operating costs have increased, and therefore their profit margin, they're taking profit to give to charities. All the workers in these shops are volunteers. I can understand they probably are clearing less money to move on to the charity. So I can understand, but in saying that, some of the I know the difference between a $1 CD and a $4 CD is not massive. It's $3. But when you're buying, which I do sometimes, buying like 10 CDs, then it does become a big difference, doesn't it? That goes from being a $10 purchase to a $40 purchase, which I just wouldn't do that. Because so many times with these CDs I'm buying, it's like I said, they're kind of borderline cases where I just want to kind of give it a try. I'm not 100% familiar with it. Now, I should actually say also the rest of the city down here, which we call South Auckland, I did those shops. I had kind of big hopes for those shops the first time I did this. And the first time I went to this area was I was working down in South Auckland. And so it was on my way home from work one day. I thought, okay, I'm going to do a circuit of all this area and try to call. This area is kind of, I guess, how can you say, it's the poorer area of the city. It's the lower socioeconomic area. And so I use some logic to think, well, maybe the secondhand shops there are better stocked. I found it was the worst area I've ever been to looking for CDs, as in they either had nothing or just absolute crap. And when I say it's the poorer area, it's not like there's not a major difference at all, really. New Zealand, of course, it's changed in the last 30 years, as it has in almost every country. Um, New Zealand is not doesn't have a massive wealth divide. And so going from like the richest area, which I guess is probably up here, we call Remuera or Orake, down to the poorest area, which is maybe somewhere like, I don't know, Otara or maybe Mangere, maybe Manurewa, kind of those areas down here. Of course, it looks different, but I don't know. It's not that different. And in our minds, maybe it's different, but it's actually not. And having traveled to a lot of countries where there is a massive wealth divide, New Zealand's a pretty egalitarian society to a degree, I should say, because a lot of people disagree with what I'm saying right now. But relatively, let's say relatively, compared to other countries, some other countries. But I was expecting that there would be these stores down here would be better stocked, but they were the worst stocked by far. Anyway, back to what I was saying before. When I visited this place, Onehunga, last week, the shops I hadn't been to for 2 or 3 years, I was almost going to leave without getting anything, but I thought I've driven all this way. I want to get something. So this is what I got. $2. So like I was saying, this is that's a little bit priced a bit above the norm, but not majorly. I've bought $2 CDs before. And what is this? This is a Hans Zimmer soundtrack, but I have no idea what it is. What is Millennium? It says Tribal Wisdom and the Modern World, Narada. A sonic adventure for the coming century by one of the 20th century's most prolific composers. Millennium was originally composed as a soundtrack for the public television series Millennium Tribal. Okay, so it was a soundtrack for a TV show. Now, I've talked about Hans Zimmer before. I've got a lot of soundtracks, and I've got quite a few soundtracks by him. And I was just kind of quickly scanning this article about his work, and the amount of stuff he's worked on is pretty amazing. So he started working in the 80s. He did Moonlighting, which was that TV show with who was in Moonlighting? Well, no, Moonlighting was that a movie? Am I thinking of two different things? Oh, what? Am I getting confused by two different? What was the one with Cher in it? Okay. Anyway, he worked on Moonlighting, but then when you start getting towards the late 80s, you start kind of noticing these movies: Rain Man, Driving Miss Daisy, Bird on a Wire, Days of Thunder, Pacific Heights. That was a great movie. That was with Michael Keaton. Green Card, Backdraft, Thelma and Louise, The Power of One, Toys. Remember that with Robin Williams. True Romance, The Lion King. So that was his first massive movie, I guess, The Lion King. Crimson Tide, and he's just kind of so many of these movies I didn't know he had worked on. The Rock, Broken Arrow, The Prince of Egypt, The Thin Red Line, one of my favorite movies of all time, The Thin Red Line, directed by Terrence Malick. And it's if you like Terrence Malick's work, if you like war movies, it's definitely a very different kind of war movie, Second World War movie, but amazing nonetheless. Gladiator, Pearl Harbor, Invincible, Hannibal, The Ring. Okay, he did The Ring. So on and on and on. He's done so many of these movies. I became familiar with him. Obviously, I'd seen these movies throughout my life, but maybe I'd never really noticed or listened to the music. But the first movie where I was kind of blown away by the soundtrack was Inception. His score in that kind of it made the movie to the point where, and I'd never done this before, I went out and bought the soundtrack on CD. This was back in 2010, where people were still kind of buying CDs, kind of. And then after that, I was always on the lookout for him, for his name, because I thought, and then yeah, like he what has he done since then? He did The Dark Knight Rises. He did I think he was part of oh, that's right, Interstellar, of course. Um, wasn't he part of Dunkirk? That's right. That was the other one that I fucking loved of his. The score of that, Supermarine. If you listen to that, that blew me away as well. And then he was, I don't think exclusively, but I think he was a big part of Blade Runner 2049, which is another soundtrack that blew me away. So he's someone where I see his name, I kind of buy the CD by default, just because I'm such a big fan, especially of his later work. Because some of those other movies I've seen, but I kind of wouldn't even notice the soundtrack, like Thelma and Louise. I've seen that movie 2 or 3 times in my life, probably Days of Thunder, but it kind of the soundtrack didn't really stand out to me. But maybe it's when he started working with Christopher Nolan that maybe he got more freedom to. But yeah, I haven't listened to this yet, even though I bought it last week. I've been so busy with work and other things that I haven't actually listened to it. So it'll be interesting to hear what this sounds like for something made in what I guess 1999. But yeah, so that was just a kind of a video that was a little bit different, probably quite boring if you're not from Auckland. Even if you are from Auckland, it's probably quite boring. But I just wanted to give an overview of I guess the way that I approach looking for secondhand CDs. Kind of I stay relatively local in my area, and then kind of a couple of times a year I kind of expand out, and then there are a few places I almost never go, and maybe I do so just a very, very limited amount of times per year, or maybe even less than that, just once every 2 years. And if you're wondering, which you're probably not, that's where the airport is. The airport's right down south of the city. So if you ever visit New Zealand, which I recommend you do, actually I don't recommend. Well, I do, of course I do recommend, but I'd say it is attracted as people who like certain kinds of tourism, like outdoor, nature, sports. If you're into kind of like history and cities and stuff, like like European cities or art galleries and stuff like that, or temples and things like that, then I'd say New Zealand would not be the destination for you. But if you do visit, you'll be arriving probably at that airport road there. Anyway, something a little bit different, eh? And my family's coming back in about 5 days, so I'm kind of trying to kind of tie things together to prepare for them coming back. And I'm looking forward to them coming home. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye bye from Auckland in the South Pacific.